Hi everyone, my name is David Ingber and I'm the rabbi of a community in New York City called Roman Mu. And I'm here to talk about obstacles and the way that we approach working with obstacles, because each and every one of us, we know each and every day of our lives we experience obstacles. In some way, shape, or form, we have a goal, we have a place to get to, we have an experience that we long for, we have something that we've set up as a target where we're going, and we meet obstacles all the time. There are obstacles that are external obstacles, things that get in our way. Literally in New York City, obstacles are, everywhere we look. Or they're internal obstacles of some kind. A painful emotion, a painful thought pattern, whatever it might be. Working with obstacles is something really vital in our spiritual path. And it's a skill that when learned can actually help ease us in life, and help us flourish and help us succeed in so many ways. Working with obstacles, of course, is a part of almost every spiritual tradition. Certainly Judaism also has a way of working with obstacles, a perspective. To say that it has only one perspective would be untrue. But there are at least a number of perspectives on how we approach an obstacle and how we work with it. One perspective on how we work with obstacles, something that was prevalent, in certain early Jewish sources, and certainly prevalent with a lot of my coaches in high school athletics, was no pain, no gain, meaning when you approach an obstacle, you use force. And the stronger the obstacle, the greater the force that you have to use to obliterate it, to push through it, to make it as if it were an enemy. The obstacle is seen as the enemy, as it were. And we have to actually conquer that enemy. And so we bring all of the force that we possibly can muster against that obstacle. Of course, the problem with that approach is that if the obstacle is very, very powerful, if it's stronger than us in some way, shape, or form, there's no way that we can bring enough force, and it overcomes us, it overwhelms us. And so to use force in that model of working with obstacles is to, in some way, shape, or form, say that the way to overcome an obstacle is to fight it. An altogether different approach, something that many of you might have heard in other spiritual paths, other religious traditions, maybe even in other martial art traditions, is actually not to fight against the obstacle with force, but to do something counterintuitive and remarkably insightful and effective. When one meets an obstacle, one actually doesn't meet it with force, but with a certain softening, a certain allowance. One actually enters into the obstacle, as it were, or allows the obstacle, as it were, to enter us in some way, so that we might learn from it, we might enter into what it's saying to us, and in some profound way, not using force to obliterate it, one transforms the obstacle into an engine for the very achievement that we seek. Sounds abstract. Let me make it a little bit more abstract and then bring it home. There was a great, great rabbi named Nachman of Breslov. He was the great-grandson of the founder of the Hasidic movement. All the Hasidim come from someone named the Baal Shem Tov, and this Rav Nachman of Breslov was the great-grandson of that great leader. So this Rav Nachman, really amazing, insightful, psychological master. You know what he said about obstacles? He said, if you look at the Torah, when you look at the Torah, where the Torah describes the revelation at Sinai, when the Jewish people, the Israelites, received Torah, they received the Torah on Sinai. There's a verse, a verse in that descriptive story which gives us an insight, he says, into obstacles. At the when the Israelites encounter God's revelation, they get scared. It's too overwhelming for them. They say, no, you Moses, you be the one to speak to God. We're overwhelmed. And the Torah then goes on to tell us in chapter 20, Umoshe nigash el ha'arafel, that vayamdu ha'am merachok uMoshe nigash el ha'arafel, that the people stood at a distance, and Moses entered into the cloud, asher sham ha'elohim. God was in that cloud. The simple literary meaning of that verse is the people were scared, they stood at a distance, and they said, you Moses, you're the fearless leader, you go into that dark cloud. But Rav Nachman, this great Hasidic teacher, said, no, it's talking about all of us all the time. People stand at a distance when they see a dark cloud, when they see something confusing, they see an obstacle. Rav Nachman called it a mini'ah, something that is like something holding us back. We see the dark cloud, Rav Nachman says, Vayamdu ha'am merachok. We stand at a distance and we say, oh, that scares me. I'm going to fight it, or I'm going to run away. Fight, flight. I'm going to go, or I'm going to fight it. But Moses enters the dark cloud because he knows God's there in that dark cloud. Says Rav Nachman of Breslov, the part of us he calls Moshe, the inner Moshe he called it. This little part of us says, you know something? In that dark cloud, in that painful place, there is wisdom. In that place where there is an obstacle, the mini'ah, the obstacle, Rav Nachman says, becomes a monea, an engine. We enter into that space. We explore it. We don't fight it. And in that profound way, the hindrance, the obstacle becomes a mystery that fuels us. It gives us vitality. It begins to dissipate. We enter into the riddle. We enter into the pain. The application of this, of course, is on almost every level. I'll take the body, for example. I've been suffering for a little while with a herniated disc. I don't know if anybody's ever had that before. But when the pain begins to arise in my body, I have two choices. I can either say, ouch, 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 and tighten and say, go away. Or I can take a deep breath and open into the edges of where the pain begins and begin to go inside and open myself into it. I can do that in relationships. I can do that with thorny problems. It doesn't mean that we no longer see it as an obstacle, but we no longer see the obstacle as an enemy. Seeing the obstacle as a friend and not an enemy is profoundly important. This is the teaching of the Jewish wisdom tradition. It echoes other spiritual traditions as well, and it gives us a deep insight into what I believe is a much more effective way of working with the various challenges that arise in all of our lives. So I bless each and every one of you that when an obstacle appears, you don't see it as an enemy, but rather potentially as a friend. Invite it in, invite yourself in, and see if that helps.